A blooming flower wavered gently in the air, its delicate petals dancing with the breeze. Beside it sat a man cloaked in black, Kronos. His gaze fixed on the fragile blossom as he spoke in a low, commanding voice. Without the key, he mused, even if he were to open the door, how would he secure the nectar? Standing nearby was Zeus, tall and composed, his voice calm but edged with concern. He informed Kronos that the Seven-Star Society had already begun moving. But would Gaia and Silone really stay silent about it? Kronos stood slowly, unfazed. So what? He replied coldly. Darkness swirled subtly in his aura as he turned toward Zeus, his eyes sharp and hollow. Whether Gaia and Silone chose to remain silent or not, it meant nothing to him. It wasn't his concern. Zeus apologized with a light chuckle, perhaps trying to defuse the tension. Kronos began walking, his black coat trailing behind him as he spoke again, more to himself than anyone. To achieve something truly great, sacrifices were inevitable. With no hesitation, he stepped directly onto the blooming flower, crushing it beneath his foot. The foolish Gaia keeps babbling about ideals, he muttered bitterly. Then, with his aura rising around him, he declared with certainty, I'm not a fool like them. I'm the man who will become the master of this world. Far away, in a place consumed by flame, a room burned violently. On the wall, a family photo hung crookedly, peaceful, warm. Then, a sudden splatter of blood stained its surface. Yugo Mizukami stood in the room, a pistol held loosely in his hand, brushing it against the back of his head. There was weariness in his voice as he spoke aloud, though mostly to himself. He had wanted to settle things peacefully. Why did people always complicate matters? His tone hardened as he addressed the wounded man on the floor, Yanagimoto-san, shot in the shoulder, bowing in pain beside his wife, who trembled near him. Yanagimoto growled out a curse at Mizukami, calling him a bastard through gritted teeth. Mizukami simply sighed. He had thought Yanagimoto would be more understanding. This man wasn't just anyone. He was a Seven-Star Society executive, boss of the Australia Zero team. Cold and calculating, he knelt beside his victim, tilting his head. He wasn't here to make friends. He wanted the truth. Yanagimoto's daughter had escaped with the nectar recipe. Mizukami asked for her whereabouts, voice calm but laced with threat. Yanagimoto smiled grimly, defiant even as blood soaked through his clothes. He would rather die than betray her. Mizukami raised the gun again, slowly aiming it at Yanagimoto's head. He muttered about how he wished the Fist Division could witness these final moments. But Yanagimoto didn't scream. He smiled, proud until the end. The scene shifted again to the front lines of a war. Gunfire crackled. Smoke filled the air. Soldiers shouted over the chaos. Among them was a masked man, Yasha. One of his comrades ran up, panicked, yelling that the enemy also had an ability user. This was Yasha's moment. While others laid down suppressing fire to prevent the enemy from gaining ground, Yasha moved alone. He slipped through the smoke like a phantom, cutting through shrubs until he paused. A bullet screamed through the air toward him. He sensed it before he saw it. With flawless precision, he twisted his blade and dodged. The enemy forces saw his mask, recognized the name, and terror spread through their ranks. Yasha. They couldn't face him alone. Yasha charged, swift and deadly. But just as he surged ahead, a wave of disorientation struck him. Memories flickered behind his eyes. Familiar, yet foreign. Had this happened before? The enemies panicked. Cries rang out to stop him. But he was already upon them. One soldier raised a weapon. Yasha's fist landed first, a crushing blow. In the next instant, his blade rose and fell, cutting the man's head clean off. Kill him quickly, someone screamed. Too late. In a single, fluid motion, Yasha cut down all who stood in his path. Their blood painted the ground. He moved forward until he finally came face to face with the enemy ability user. Yasha's sharp gaze scanned him. Thankfully, he wasn't an awakener. The enemy lunged, both men clashing violently. Their blades collided with a loud metallic cry, then went flying in opposite directions. Yasha cursed inwardly. Damn it, if only I wasn't in the middle of shedding. The symptoms were getting worse. He had no time. He had to end this. Gathering energy, Yasha rushed forward. But the opponent skillfully dodged and blocked his attacks. Then, with a sudden tug of telekinetic force, the enemy recalled his blade to his hand. As expected of someone called Yasha, he sneered. But still, a bit disappointing. Yasha shifted his stance, fluid, precise, and in that single moment, with perfect control and deadly power, he delivered his final strike. The fight was over. Later, aboard an airplane, Yasha drifted into an uneasy sleep. Darkness closed in, and within it, two women stood before him. Vague, ghostly. One asked the other if she truly believed this kid could become the key. The other responded with confidence. Don't worry. Fate will guide him. Yasha's eyes snapped open. He ran a hand through his hair, disoriented. Ever since I returned to Japan, I've been feeling dizzy. He wondered. Was it just a dream? No. It was more than that. It was a memory. What does ki even mean? He had no answer. Only a growing sense of dread. Eventually, he arrived at a place buried in childhood memories, a quiet, hidden spot he used to visit with his father. The room was dark, cold, and used for years. Dust covered everything. A single chair sat before several dormant computers. Yasha stepped in cautiously, pulling a phone from an old bag. The entire path here had felt strange, too quiet, too ominous. What happened while I was gone? He considered calling his parents. They had to be worried. He powered on the phone. It buzzed to life, revealing a flood of missed messages. His heart sank. Dozens of messages, left unanswered. His hands trembled as he read. His family had tried desperately to reach him, again and again, pleading with him to respond. Then, one message froze his blood. My deepest condolences. We couldn't get in touch with your family. We can't release the bodies without consent. Chiho Yanagimoto and Eriko Yanagimoto. They both have passed away. His uncle, his aunt, gone. And May, his cousin, missing. His knees weakened. His mind went blank. Tears streamed silently down his face. He poured liquor into a glass, staring into it blankly as the weight of it all crashed down on him. Then the silence broke. Screams. Cries. Agony. He howled in anguish, drove his fingers into the floor so hard they bled, slammed his head into the ground in fury. Pain wasn't enough. Anger boiled over. I'll find them, he screamed. The ones who did this to my father and mother, and I will surely avenge them. The scene shifts to a busy city, buzzing with life and noise. A girl hurried through the morning crowd, rushing to get to her job. Her thoughts raced with frustration as she muttered to herself. On bad days, nothing goes right, no matter what you do. As soon as the day started, my weekend plans began to fall apart. She stepped out of her house, clutching her ID card in one hand. The card revealed her name, Aoi Miyahara. She was a reporter working for a company called CH2, the world's #1 news channel. As she continued down the street, she thought to herself, why is the channel in such a rush over that article? Still in a hurry, she reminded herself, I should book my seat for it. It was Sunday, and at the Tokyo-bound bus stop, a bus stood ready to depart. A notice read, it's the last day of the long weekend, so all seats are sold out. Luckily, Aoi managed to reserve the very last seat. As she boarded the bus and moved toward her seat, she glanced at the person sitting beside her. A man wearing dirty clothes, in bad condition, asleep in his seat. It was Yasha. Aoi stared at him with disbelief and annoyance. Seriously, how unlucky can I get? Of all people, I end up next to this weird guy with no common sense. She examined him further. What's with him? He reeks of alcohol, his clothes are covered in dirt, and he's dirtying the seat. It looks like he was drinking all night. Yasha let out a heavy sigh in his sleep, and with it came the sharp, pungent smell of alcohol that hit Aoi straight in the face. She cringed and, out of frustration, pulled out her earbuds, placing them in her ears and playing music to drown everything out. Suddenly, a loud noise shook the entire bus. Aoi's earbuds fell from her ears. Shocked, she looked around, unable to process what was happening. The interior of the bus was drenched in blood. Some passengers were injured, others weren't moving. She panicked. Did the bus just get into an accident? Everything felt like a blur. The bus had lost control and was about to plunge into the river. Aoi quickly tried to unbuckle her seatbelt. The vehicle lurched violently forward. It was airborne. She was falling behind, helpless. Her mind screamed, "Am I going to die like this?" Suddenly, a hand reached out and gripped her by the belt. It was Yasha. He was holding onto a seat with one hand and gripping Aoi tightly with the other. Her eyes widened in shock. "This person, he's the one who was sitting next to me." Before she could say more, Yasha lost his grip. Aoi began to fall. But in one desperate motion, Yasha smashed through the broken glass and pushed her out, saving her from being trapped inside. She landed hard but safe, coughing, shaking on the ground. Yasha was still hanging onto the door of the bus, which was now barely holding together. Aoi, full of fear, watched him. What is he doing now? The bus slammed into something with a thunderous impact. An explosion followed. Flames engulfed the wreckage. Aoi gasped, wondering, after that explosion, could anyone still be alive in there? The bus crashed into the river and began floating, half sunken, torn, and burning. All around her, chaos erupted. Cars had collided with one another on the road, creating a horrifying scene of destruction. People were screaming, running, utter panic. Aoi was frozen, unable to speak. Her hands trembled. "The guy who saved me, he's still in there. And many others with him." She fell to her knees, bowing her head in disbelief. Her mind was numb. Then, someone shouted nearby, pointing toward the bus. "There's a survivor over there." Aoi looked up quickly. "There's no way, not after that explosion." But then, Yasha appeared. He crawled through the broken window, emerging from the floating bus, alive. Her eyes welled with tears. He had survived. But that wasn't all. He was carrying another passenger, someone unconscious, on his back. Aoi knew she had to do something. She didn't have time to contact the company. She had to get this out to the world. Right now. She calmed herself, pulled out her phone, and went live. Her voice cracked slightly at first, but grew steady as she began to report. "This is an emergency broadcast. This is Aoi Miyahara reporting live from the scene. Just now, a bus accident occurred on the highway. A bus carrying many passengers fell approximately 30 meters off a cliff." She was recording it all with her camera, broadcasting live. As she filmed the burning wreck, she asked herself, why hasn't the rescue team arrived yet? She turned her phone back to the viewers and spoke again. "There is a hero on that bus. He saved me, and now he's saving the other passengers as well." The people standing along the road were watching with awe as Yasha, covered in blood and smoke, carried one passenger after another from the wreck. He wasn't stopping. Aoi kept filming, capturing every moment of the rescue. Eventually, Yasha brought out all the remaining passengers, helping each one to safety while the bus continued to float dangerously on the water. Suddenly, a message popped up on her phone from her office. Her boss was furious, yelling about the unauthorized live stream. But Aoi didn't care. "This is my chance," she told herself. She quickly compiled the basic details and sent the story to the office, attaching the footage she had captured. Back at CH2 headquarters, her report set the entire newsroom into overdrive. Editors scrambled to process the footage, writers compiled headlines, and anchors prepared to go live. Everyone was working fast and focused. And at the center of it all was Yasha. But no one knows his name or real identity. The bus flipped violently, its metallic frame groaning as it turned over and crashed into the river. Slowly, it began to sink into the water, bubbles rising to the surface like silent screams. On the riverbank, Yasha stood still, eyes locked onto the wreckage. He didn't move, didn't speak. He simply watched. Then, a woman's wailing broke through the crowd's stunned silence. Her cries were raw, frantic. "My child. My kid is still in the bus." She pushed against the bystanders, trying to leap toward the water, but several people restrained her. She fought back, screaming louder. "The bus is sinking. My child's still in there. There's no point saving me if he dies." Yasha turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. His gaze shifted from the woman to the dark waters ahead, then lifted skyward as if searching for resolve in the clouds above. Without a word, he broke into a sprint, his body slicing through the air, and dove straight into the river. On shore, Aoi Miyahara was still live-streaming the entire event, her camera focused and trembling slightly in her hands. Her voice carried the weight of what she was witnessing. "He's gone back in. That man is diving into the water again, this time to save a child." Beneath the surface, Yasha surged forward through the murky depths. The golden light in his eyes ignited, illuminating the dark like a beacon. Energy flared around him as he activated his power, and within seconds, he located the child trapped inside the sinking bus. The boy was unconscious, curled beneath a row of seats. Yasha's movements became a blur of precision and strength. Golden energy coiled around his body as he reached out, pulling the child into his arms and making a break for the surface. But just as he neared the exit, an explosion tore through the water. A violent blast rocked the river, sending a powerful wave crashing over the surface. From the shore, Aoi gasped. He hasn't come back up yet." Her heart pounded. What if he's trapped inside the bus? The mother, still on her knees, stared at the river in horror. Her hands trembled as tears streamed down her face. She had seen the explosion. Her soul screamed the truth she didn't want to believe. But then, a hand broke the surface. Yasha emerged, his arm clinging to a stone at the edge of the riverbank. The child was still in his arms, breathing. The mother rushed forward, collapsing as she pulled her son from Yasha's grasp. Thank you so much," she cried, holding her boy tightly. Yasha stood tall beside them, soaked and bruised, yet smiling softly as the weight of life returned to the child's chest. Aoi caught everything on the live stream. Her voice cracked with emotion. The man risked his life to rescue the boy. The child has been safely returned to his family. Moments later, helicopters thundered overhead. The rescue team finally arrived to take control of the scene. A lone hero emerges from an extreme situation. The lives of many passengers were saved. Authorities made a public statement shortly after. As soon as the rescue operation is complete, we will begin our investigation and assess the damage of this tragic incident. The world's attention snapped to the story. News broadcasts and headlines were filled with footage from the crash. Investigators confirmed that the incident was caused by a vehicular conflict between crime organizations, a deadly crash that sent innocent people into chaos. The death toll climbed, but people weren't just mourning the dead, they were asking new questions. One in particular: who was the man that saved them? In an era where the concept of a true hero had been buried beneath media hype, politics, and fear, a nameless man had saved lives without expecting anything in return. And just like that, society's focus shifted. They didn't care about the scale of the crash anymore. They wanted to know, who was that man? Several days passed. Inside the towering glass building of CH2 headquarters, Aoi Miyahara stood before her boss. The CEO's expression was cold and serious. "You were reckless," he said sharply. "Even if it was an emergency. You started a broadcast deliberately?" He paced across the room, frustration boiling. "At that crash site, you didn't even call. You were just sending us messages." "Why?" Aoi remained silent, her eyes low. Then the CEO paused. "You don't know how worried we were." Aoi blinked. "We were worried about you," he said, softer now, "because you were involved in that incident." Aoi's breath caught in her throat. The anger in the room softened for just a moment. "Well, as long as you're healthy, it's fine," the CEO said, waving his hand. She smiled gently, a bit stunned. "Still," he added, "you'll need to write an apology letter. And from now on, no more reckless decisions. Go back to work." Be careful next time. As Aoi turned to leave, one of her team leaders caught her in the hallway. You're in charge of the articles about that hero, he told her. Everyone wants to know his identity. Aoi paused, her heart stirring. Yasha, is he okay? She had asked the rescue team about him before, but they only said he left the scene shortly after the rescue. Quietly, without a name. I didn't even thank him properly. An idea sparked in her mind. Maybe I can find him again. Maybe I can use an interview as an excuse to meet him. He's a hero from among the civilians, so he must be a good person. Somewhere, in a place unknown, Yasha stood still, his surroundings unrevealed, the world around him quiet and out of focus. He pulled out his own phone, its surface worn and weathered, and made a call. The line rang a few times before a familiar voice picked up. Well, I never thought the citizen hero would be the one calling me. It was Hermes, his tone as mocking and amused as ever. Yasha's eyes narrowed slightly. Stop calling me that. Hermes chuckled. Oh, you don't like it? Then how about Hiro Yanagimoto Ken? Is that nickname okay? The name lingered in the air, Yanagimoto Ken, his real name, one he hadn't used in years. But Yasha didn't flinch.
His voice was steady.
I didn't call for jokes, he said firmly. I'm looking for someone. Back in the city, inside the bustling headquarters of CH2, a large poster of the mysterious hero, Yasha, had been plastered on the wall. Beneath it, a hotline number was displayed. If you have any information about this citizen hero, please contact us. What had begun as a serious initiative quickly descended into chaos. The phone lines were constantly ringing. Most of the calls were useless, pranksters pretending to know the hero, others going as far as to cosplay him, showing up in messy clothes and pretending to be drunk. It was absurd. Aoi Miyahara, watching the growing disorder, pressed her hand against her forehead in frustration. This had been her idea, her plan. And now it was spiraling out of control. I shouldn't have suggested it, she muttered under her breath. But just as she was about to return to her desk, her phone buzzed. A new email arrived. She opened it and froze. Her eyes widened. Without saying another word, she stood and rushed to her team leader. I'm heading out, she called. He blinked, startled. Where are you going in the middle of all this? At least submit the apology letter first. But she was already gone. In her car, speeding through the city, Aoi was on the phone, identifying herself and confirming the tip she had received. On the other end, she was instructed to head to the office of the park cemetery. Without delay, she followed the directions. There, waiting for her, was the man who had sent the message, Akiyama Takuru-san. He didn't say much, just nodded and confirmed. Yep, that's him. He pointed at the printed photo of Yasha in Aoi's hands. Akiyama explained that he had seen the man a few months earlier. He was dressed just like in the footage.
Dirty, worn out, he said.
I remember because first he left offerings at a grave. Then he sat there the entire day drinking. Aoi listened in silence. Eventually, she made her way to that very gravestone. She stood before it, quiet, reflective. So that's why he looked like that. He had lost someone. That's why he drank so much. She turned to one of the cemetery staff nearby. Whose grave is this? She asked gently. Who does it belong to? Meanwhile, in a busy town square, a massive digital screen displayed a special news bulletin. The announcement echoed across the plaza. Authorities are currently searching for the citizen hero involved in the highway accident. According to eyewitness reports, he risked his life to save the passengers. His description was broadcast in full. In a dramatic gesture of appreciation, the government announced a gold medal of honor and a 1 million yen reward for any reliable information that could lead to identifying the hero. Somewhere in the city, Yasha walked alone. He'd heard the broadcasts, seen the posters, but his face remained calm, unreadable. By now, those looking for me should have figured it out, he thought. If I had the strength, I would destroy those criminal organizations myself. But his body wasn't there yet. He wasn't fully healed. He had to be smarter. So instead of chasing them, he had set a plan into motion, one that would lure the enemy to him. He would bait the criminal networks out into the open. They must be backed by someone powerful, he reasoned. A financial sponsor. I'll make that man come to me. And once that happened, he'd finally uncover the truth about his sister and about himself. His thoughts were cut short by a scream. Help me. Yasha's eyes narrowed. He turned his head sharply toward the sound. A voice. A cry for help. And then he saw them. Just down the street, tucked inside a filthy alley, a group of thugs were hanging around, drinking, smoking, laughing crudely. Some were talking about human trafficking. One bragged about selling a heavily drugged girl the night before. Near a graffiti-covered wall, a girl lay half-conscious on a stained couch. A dark bruise marked her cheek. A man walked toward her, a small vial of drugs in hand. This stuff ain't cheap, he snickered. You think you're getting it for free? Then came a voice.
Clear. Come.
From behind them, Yasha stepped into the alley. They turned.
Confused.
Who the hell are you? One of them barked. Yasha said nothing at first. He stepped forward, scanning their faces. Then he spoke. You guys are trash, he said coldly. Living like bastards. Chained to your own filth. He smirked, mocking. For scum like you, who can't survive without chasing pleasure, you really are nothing but cowards. One man snapped, his face twisted in rage. You son of a... He lunged, fists swinging wildly. He landed punch after punch on Yasha's face, blow after blow, but Yasha didn't flinch. He stood there, silent, unmoving, taking it all. The other men watched in disbelief. He's done for, one muttered. But then, Yasha moved. He caught the man's fist in midair. The bone cracked under the pressure of his grip. The man screamed in agony. The others panicked and rushed toward him. But Yasha was a storm. With swift, calculated strikes, he threw them back, sending bodies flying into the walls, crashing into crates and pavement. His power was overwhelming. His aura undeniable. The alley was filled with gasps and groans. The men, beaten and terrified, backed away. Yasha stood firm, not even out of breath. He looked at the last man still conscious and said with a smirk, You were the ones who threw the first punch. This is self-defense. Got it. Back in the alley, tension thickened like smoke as a group of men surged forward, knives, blades, and makeshift weapons glinting under dim streetlight. Their faces twisted with rage and arrogance, believing their numbers would overwhelm him. But Yasha didn't flinch. He merely smiled. The first attacker lunged, slashing wildly. Yasha moved like a shadow, swift and precise. He spun effortlessly, dodging the blade, then slammed the man down with bone-crunching force. Another thug rushed in from the side, hoping to catch him off guard, but Yasha evaded smoothly and countered with a push that sent the man hurtling backward like a rag doll. A short distance away, more gang members heard the ruckus from the alley. One of them frowned, annoyed by the disruption, and turned to a tall, broad-shouldered man beside him, their most trusted enforcer. Go settle it, he ordered, his tone sharp. The enforcer, sensing something was off, nodded. He seems like a tough one. But as he approached the alley, the sight before him was staggering. Yasha stood in the center, untouched, while the bodies of the other men lay sprawled across the ground, groaning, unconscious, or too injured to move. Who are you? The henchman demanded, eyes narrowing. Yasha's response was calm, almost bored. Just a civilian passing by. It got noisy, so I came to check it out. The enforcer scoffed. Don't get cocky just because you took out some underlings. Without warning, he lunged, throwing a heavy punch. But Yasha sidestepped it with ease. In one seamless movement, he kicked the enforcer hard in the ribs, then grabbed his head. His eyes flickered with a red aura as he drove a devastating punch into the man's face, launching him across the alley and slamming him into a wall. The gang boss, watching from a distance, blinked in disbelief. Who the hell is this guy? Before he could react, another thug sprinted toward Yasha, wielding a half-empty bottle of alcohol. Yasha's expression turned cold. With one fluid motion, he brought the man down in a single, brutal blow. Now standing alone in the silence, Yasha exhaled slowly, the air around him seeming to shift with his power. Then, screeching tires. A car tore down the alley toward him, engine roaring. Behind the wheel was the golden-haired man, the same one who had drugged the girl earlier. His face was twisted in panic as he tried to escape. Yasha didn't move. As the car came within inches of hitting him, he stepped down with crushing force. The car's hood crumpled like foil beneath his foot. The golden glow in his eyes intensified. His ability had activated. Reaching through the shattered windshield, Yasha grabbed the driver by the collar and yanked him out effortlessly, throwing him onto the pavement. Please have mercy," the man begged, his voice trembling. Yasha grinned coldly. "Don't worry, I won't kill you." Behind him, the girl who had been drugged began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, groggy but conscious. Yasha turned to her and spoke calmly. "Stay put. This will be over soon." Then, turning back to the thug, his voice darkened. "Isn't that right?"
Yasha.
The man froze. He hadn't told Yasha his name. "Give me your phone," Yasha demanded. Yosuke obeyed, hands shaking. Yasha flipped through the phone and confirmed, "Your name's Yosuke. That correct?" Yosuke nodded, too afraid to speak. Yasha's tone hardened. "What does your father do?" Yosuke hesitated. He's a member of the National Parliament. So it was true. Everything in Yasha's investigation had been accurate so far. "Does he know what you're doing?" Yasha asked sharply. Yosuke remained silent, had bowed in shame. Without another word, Yasha dialed a number from the phone. A voice picked up almost instantly. "Yosuke, where have you been?" "It's late. Are you trying to get in trouble again like last time?" Yasha brought the phone closer to his mouth. "Mr. Maeda? Yosuke's father?" The voice on the other end stiffened. "Who is this?" "Your son has been caught with drugs. Attempted rape, assault, and more. He was caught red-handed. He's looking at a prison sentence of at least 10 years. The line went quiet for a moment. "What? Are you the police?" "No," Yasha replied. "Just a passerby. Yosuke and his friends subjected me to terrible violence. Naturally, I'll need compensation." He pointed the phone toward Yosuke, his eyes glowing faintly again. "You made the first move. Isn't that right, Yosuke?" Yosuke nodded desperately, muttering an apology. Yasha continued, "We have dashcam footage of him trying to run me over while drunk. The drug dealer is here. The victim's here too. They'll testify." On the other end, Mr. Maeda's voice cracked. "Let's talk. How much do you want?" 100 million yen, Yasha said bluntly. "And a promise not to hurt the victim." Maeda snapped. "Are you out of your mind?" Yasha hovered his thumb near the live stream button. "Shall I go live?" 50 million yen, Maeda growled. Still silent, Yasha slightly adjusted his stance, thumbs still hovering. "Damn it. Fine," Maeda conceded. "Let's handle this quietly. A man like you can erase any leaks. Even if someone has evidence, no one will believe it." Maeda's anger boiled over. "Yosuke, you've been nothing but a burden." To Yasha, he added, "There'll be an untraceable check, securities, and cash bundles in old currency." Yasha finally nodded. "Good. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'll send the location." With that, he tossed the phone back to Yosuke. Turning to the girl, his tone softened. "Sorry to keep you waiting. I know you want to go home, but if you go back now, those nightmares will never stop. To get rid of fear, you need to eliminate the source." At dawn the next morning, Mr. Maeda arrived at the agreed location, face cold and tense. He handed over the money, neatly packed, exactly as promised. Without a word, Yasha gave it all to the girl. She stared in disbelief, tears brimming in her eyes. Is this really all for me?" "Don't thank me," Yasha said softly. "I'm just a passing thug. Forget about me." But in her heart, he was far more than that. As Maeda turned to leave, rage smoldered beneath his composed exterior. His political career now hung in jeopardy. He couldn't let it go. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. The name flashed on the screen. Yugo Mizukami. The same man who had murdered Yasha's uncle and aunt. Mizukami answered with a casual drawl. Maeda? What do you want? Maeda's voice was like ice. I need someone dealt with. Use any means necessary. The reward is 50 million yen in cash. On the other end, Mizukami smirked. All right then. Tell me everything. In a dimly lit room, a man watched shaky footage of Yasha saving people, astonished by what he saw. He wondered aloud how Yasha was managing to rescue all the passengers by himself. Nearby, a terrified girl bit her thumb in nervous tension. She insisted that the face and the movement in the video were unmistakably Yasha's. Despite the poor video quality, she was certain it was him. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She still vividly remembered that horrifying aura. Across the table, another man slammed his fist down, insisting Yasha had died in battle long ago. Around the table, 3 men and 2 women sat, the presence of one empty chair serving as a silent reminder of uncertainty. They all questioned how Yasha could possibly have returned. One woman reminded them that there was no time to panic and that the reason for their gathering was to discuss countermeasures. Another man added that reporting the situation to Kei would be pointless. They would have to handle it themselves. The girl turned to Mizukami and questioned why he was on the phone at a time like this. Mizukami, standing nearby, ended his call and informed the group that he had sent someone to Maeda's place because Maeda's son had gotten mixed up with a thug. The girl criticized Mizukami sarcastically, remarking that she hadn't realized the 7-Star Society had started cleaning up after spoiled children. Then, a man with a sharp gaze silenced the room and suggested they get to the main topic. He asked what they thought Yasha would do next. One of the men, visibly nervous, admitted he had no idea. He said, knowing Yasha's personality, it was possible he could attack the 7-Star Society's headquarters at any moment. The girl added that Yasha wasn't just reckless, he was likely searching for strong, crazy allies to counter them. Meanwhile, Aoi had arrived at Yasha's house and knocked on the door. When Yasha opened it, he was momentarily stunned into silence. Aoi expressed relief at finally meeting him. Yasha asked how she had found his place. She explained that she had come before, but he had always been away. Yasha asked her what brought her there and said if it was for an interview, he wasn't interested. Aoi quickly clarified that it wasn't for public purposes. She had come simply to thank him. She had asked many questions as a reporter in the past, but this time it was personal. She then grabbed Yasha's phone and questioned why he had helped her, but left no contact information. As she opened his phone to save her number, she noticed his contacts were categorized into 3 groups: people he called, people he received calls from, and people he must not answer calls from. She found the categorization unusual and asked him about the distinction between those he called and those he answered. Yasha explained that it was a matter of initiative. Those he called were people he needed to reach first, while those he answered were people he couldn't afford to ignore. Aoi speculated that those were important people and pointed out she had been saved under the answer category. Yasha clarified that the designation meant they were people whose calls couldn't be refused. Aoi moved to change the category, but Yasha told her it was fine. He added that ignoring someone who went out of their way to visit could be a serious mistake. As Yasha smiled, Aoi blushed, remarking to herself how different he looked when he smiled. Later, they sat across from each other at a cafe, chatting over coffee. In a car outside, one of Mizukami's men watched them. He sarcastically remarked on the world they lived in, amused by the sight of a thug flirting with a girl at a cafe. He had been sent by Mizukami to deal with Maeda's problem. After the coffee, Aoi called a taxi. As she was leaving, she told Yasha she would contact him again. Inside the taxi, she felt a rush of satisfaction. She thought about how she had thanked him, treated him to coffee, and spent time talking and walking with him. Then the realization struck. She wondered if it had been a date. Embarrassed, she slammed her head against the window, causing the taxi to shake. Yasha turned, his senses tingling. Something felt wrong. Footsteps approached, and he asked the approaching men who they were. One of them flashed a card and assured Yasha they weren't suspicious. He claimed they were from a private investigation agency and had received a report about an assault targeting students. He asked for Yasha's cooperation. Yasha took the card with a sinister smile and agreed to cooperate. They arrived at a dark park lit only by a few glowing lamps. The man began talking, describing how students had reported being attacked without warning. Yasha suggested maybe the students had deserved it and accused the group of using money and lackeys to play the victim. The man then told Yasha that there was both good and bad news. The good news, he said, was that their client had instructed them not to kill the perpetrator. Other men slowly surrounded Yasha. Then came the bad news. The man pointed a gun at Yasha and said that his irritating chatter had become unbearable. Yasha, unfazed, asked if he could ask a question. The man permitted it. Yasha asked whether they had reported his capture to their client. The man replied that they hadn't, not yet. He planned to kill Yasha first. Yasha grinned darkly. That was convenient, he said. With that, his eyes ignited in gold, and a blazing aura surrounded him. The leader panicked and fired, but Yasha moved with terrifying speed, dodging effortlessly. He appeared right in front of the man, whose punch he avoided easily. Yasha grabbed the man by the collar and hurled him across the park. The remaining men froze in panic. Yasha's presence overwhelmed them. With a deadly look, he lunged. He seized one man's arm and struck him in the stomach with his knee. Then he hurled the man's own knife toward another attacker, grazing his face. Bleeding and terrified, the wounded man collapsed to the ground. Yasha stood over them. He reloaded the gun and declared that he had good news and bad news for them too. The bad news, he said with a wicked smile, was that he wouldn't kill them. He aimed the gun and asked what they would do now. He started to count. 3, 2, 1. The men did nothing. Fear had completely paralyzed them. Yasha, growing colder by the second, asked why they weren't answering. His tone cut through the silence like a blade. He warned that if they were stalling for time, it was useless. One of the men remained frozen on the ground, trembling too hard to respond. Yasha, now oozing malice, pointed the gun to the side of the man's head and coldly asked if his ears were clogged, if that's why he didn't hear the question. Terrified, the man's eyes widened. He screamed for a moment to wait. But Yasha didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. A single shot rang out. The man clutched the side of his head, where his ear had been grazed, screaming in agony as blood trickled through his fingers. Nearby, one of the others began to shake uncontrollably. Panicked, he shouted that he understood, promising never to appear before Yasha again. Desperation flooded his voice as he offered to pay Yasha everything. No, more than the job was worth. But Yasha dismissed the offer. He told them not to misunderstand. This wasn't about money. He then demanded the man's phone, asking if it contained the contact information of the one who had hired them. The man hesitated, trying to guess Yasha's intentions. He considered the risks of handing it over and instead offered even more cash. But Yasha repeated himself. It wasn't about the money. He told them they were failing to understand the situation. One of the men, starting to unravel, muttered in disbelief, asking if Yasha already knew who the client was. Yasha stepped forward, now looming directly over him, and stated flatly, "The 7-Star Society." Was that not the case? The man panicked further. He couldn't understand how Yasha knew such things, or worse, why he would act so recklessly despite knowing them. He tried to reason with Yasha, warning him that the 7-Star Society wasn't something one man could take on. To challenge them, he said, was to make an enemy of the entire nation. They had their hands in politics, media, and an endless supply of money. Even the president was just a puppet to them. He pleaded, warning that laying a hand on someone like Yugo Mizukami wouldn't lead to justice. It would mean fleeing abroad just to survive. He reluctantly handed over his phone and offered to introduce Yasha to a skilled doctor who could change his face. But Yasha sneered, letting out a sigh, as if humored by such desperation. Sitting calmly in front of him, he said he appreciated the advice, but this was neither a deal nor a collaboration. Locking eyes with the man, Yasha told him he had only one option: to hand over the phone. Then, aiming the gun at the man's ear, he asked again if his ears were clogged. Touching the weapon to the man's head, Yasha added that from the looks of it, both ears seemed useless. He tilted the gun upward, pointing it toward the man's eyes, and with a devilish smile, asked if perhaps something was stuck in those too, offering to clean it for him. A few minutes later, the three men were running down the street, breathless and terrified. The leader of the group muttered in disbelief, asking who the hell Yasha really was. He'd barely escaped with his life. Worse yet, Yasha now had their client's information. If word of that reached the organization, they'd all be marked for death. One of the others, still clutching the side of his head, asked what they were supposed to do now. He suggested reporting everything honestly to the organization, but another warned him that doing so would be suicide. If the higher-ups learned they'd given Yasha sensitive intel, they'd all be executed. They debated reporting the incident, but admitted they had no evidence to offer. Then their leader came up with the plan. He pointed out that the area they were currently in was swarming with detective agencies. Conflict and ambushes were common these days. They could lie and claim they'd been attacked by rogue detectives, using their injuries as proof. One of the subordinates asked if those same detectives would back up their story. The leader answered bluntly, they wouldn't need them. He'd kill the detectives. That way, there'd be no one to testify. After all, he said coldly, this world was built on survival of the fittest. The weak would be crushed. Only the strong had rights. Elsewhere, Yasha now held the phone in his hand, having secured the exact data he needed. The scene transitioned to a hospital. Inside the 7th examination room, Yasha sat across from a doctor. The doctor asked if he had any chronic illnesses, surprised at how agile Yasha was despite the condition of his body. Yasha gave a faint smile and replied that he had been sick back in high school, but asked if his condition was really that bad. The doctor, looking at the scans, commented that based on the state of Yasha's body, it wouldn't be strange to say he had the physique of a man in his 60s, or even 70s. Yasha chuckled, admitting that he often got told he looked like an old man, and asked if fighting was out of the question. With a sigh, the doctor said it was no good. If Yasha punched someone in the face, it wouldn't be the opponent's face that broke, but his own fist. Then the doctor asked what Yasha planned to do. Surely, he wasn't going to keep fighting like this? He went on to explain that Yasha had severe emphysema in his left lung and likely suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. His memory, too, was deteriorating rapidly. As Yasha listened in silence, his thoughts wandered. He had been carelessly collecting every trivial detail and clue for some time now. His hands began to tremble. He could feel the shedding process beginning. Shedding, a phenomenon where an ability user's entire cellular structure is replaced before advancing to the 3rd stage. It was rare and dangerous. This hospital, Yasha knew, was under the influence of the 7-Star Society. But he had come here as part of a calculated trap. All he needed now was for them to take the bait. Somewhere else, a man was seen walking through a dark corridor, holding an envelope in his hand. He entered a shadowy room, the same one where the 7-Star Society had previously gathered to discuss Yasha's return. This time, only 2 members were present at the table. The other 4 chairs remained empty. The man remarked that it was time for the meeting and questioned what the others were doing. One of the seated members informed him that Yugo had encountered an unexpected issue and wouldn't be attending, while Saki's trauma had worsened, preventing her from coming. Kazuki, he added, had gone to report to Kei. A girl sitting nearby had smirked at that point, commenting that the situation felt like a college group project meeting. A man seated across from her had growled in response, saying there was too much fuss over a single thug. The man who had brought the envelope placed it on the table and said he had something to discuss regarding Yasha. He explained that Yasha had undergone a health checkup earlier that day, and the envelope contained the results. The girl had opened the file and flipped through it. Her eyes had widened as she remarked in disbelief that Yasha wasn't a critical patient at all. Another member had leaned in, stating that Yasha had clearly sustained injuries in battle and during a bus accident. Someone else had added that now would be the perfect chance to strike, though the main issue remained his current location. Another had nodded and confirmed that Yasha's location had been identified. He had applied to return to the university. At this, the girl had grinned and noted that it was that university, the one Yasha had once attended. She had also pointed out that they had connections there. Her tone had suddenly turned sharp as she commented that the world was dangerous, and even a fight at a university could lead to death. Then, with a glint of mischief, she had leaned forward and suggested, half-jokingly, that perhaps Yasha was actually an agent from some suspicious organization. She had giggled and said she was just kidding. A man had then spoken firmly, saying they couldn't afford to leave a dangerous element unattended. He had identified himself as a member of the security committee and declared that he would take care of the matter. That man was Koji Ayano, son of the chief of staff. Another man, owner of the country's largest internet platform and broadcast station, had then offered a calm suggestion: Yasha should be killed carefully, and he would handle the aftermath. Someone had asked whether their university connections would be sufficient for the plan. To that, the girl had laughed darkly, saying that the Seven-Star Society had capable users. She had then suggested that they begin their university life the very next day. That girl was Kanzaki Tomo, the chief secretary to the prime minister and the daughter of a powerful member of parliament. On a dark night, beneath a sky dimly lit by a bright moon, Yasha's phone suddenly rang. He picked it up. It was Hermes on the line. In his usual flamboyant tone, Hermes greeted him with mock affection, asking if Yasha had missed him. He sarcastically remarked that it was an honor to receive a call from the hero himself. Yasha ignored the antics and got straight to the point, asking Hermes about May, his sister. Hermes replied with feigned disappointment, calling Yasha cold. He told him that May's situation would take a bit more time to resolve, but offered that he had more interesting information in the meantime. He revealed that there was a girl named Kuniyama Aki who knew something related to the case. He said he'd send her location via message. Yasha, alarmed, asked whether Hermes had dragged Aki into this after all, and if she was safe. Hermes reassured him that she was still within the country, but that reaching her was harder than going abroad. He explained that the place was nearby, yet difficult to find. Most people wouldn't even be able to get close, but Yasha, Hermes implied, might be different. When Yasha asked what Hermes truly meant, Hermes laughed and finally revealed that Aki had been captured by the Seven-Star Society. Yasha was struck silent. His body froze as though something had pierced his chest. In the next instant, the phone was still in his hand, but Yasha had already vanished into the darkness. On the other end, Hermes chuckled and mocked him, saying he should keep running desperately toward his death until he ran out of breath. Yasha ran through the city, his heart pounding. The streets blurred past him as he raced to find Aki. At another location, a glass of alcohol sat quietly, ice cubes clinking inside it. Mizukami stood near it, listening as one of his subordinates reported that they had lost track of Yasha. The man explained that they had been ambushed by another office. Mizukami, now on the phone, spoke coldly to someone, apparently a doctor, complaining that they were short on staff and that he was tempted to recruit the doctor's personal guards. His tone then darkened further as he made a veiled threat. If the doctor happened to die in an unfortunate accident, there would be no need for guards anymore. It was Mr. Maeda on the other end. After the call ended, Mizukami muttered that he despised people who didn't know their place. He began thinking about the girl who had escaped. The mere thought of her, referred to as escaped goods, made his skin crawl. Thinking of Yasha's return, he gritted his teeth, cursing that even the ones he thought were dead had now come back. He grabbed the alcohol bottle and muttered that those people should have stayed quiet, but instead, they always interfered. He poured the alcohol over the head of a girl sitting silently near him and growled that the ones who could have fixed the situation were utterly useless. His voice lowered to a cruel whisper as he wondered aloud whether he should cut their tongues out. He reasoned that as long as they still had their eyes and fingers, they could still send messages. At that moment, one of his men entered the room and apologized for interrupting. He informed Mizukami that the Seven-Star Society had contacted them to discuss something regarding Yasha. Mizukami told him he would attend the meeting shortly and also instructed him to take the girl to another location. Outside the building, Mizukami's men were preparing to load the girl into a car. One of them muttered that she was troublesome and that if she had just acted as a decoy, he wouldn't have treated her so harshly. Then a voice came from behind, asking what they were doing. The girl recognized it immediately and called out. Yasha had arrived. One of the men with long hair turned to face him and asked who he was. Yasha's golden eyes began to glow as his powers activated. His tone turned deadly cold as he simply replied that he was just a passing thug. The long-haired man laughed and warned Yasha to get lost if he didn't want to die. But before he could react, Yasha's hand struck him with incredible force, launching him across the lot and knocking him unconscious against a wall. The other two men stood in stunned silence, frozen in place. One of them recovered and rushed Yasha, launching several attacks, but Yasha dodged them effortlessly. He caught the man by the face and slammed him into the wall. The final man tried to stab Yasha with a blade, but Yasha smoothly dodged it, seized him by the hair, and slammed his head against the car with such force that blood splattered. Yasha's anger burned brighter. He pressed the man's head harder into the vehicle, then lifted it again and, with cold fury in his voice, asked whether the car was expensive. He dragged all three of the unconscious men and laid them beside the vehicle before turning to the girl. She scolded him, asking why he was so late. Yasha gently held her hand and apologized, saying it was his fault. The girl, Aki, then explained how she had escaped to the northern region but was ultimately captured by the Seven-Star Society. She shared everything she knew. It was then that Yasha learned the horrifying truth. It was the Seven-Star Society who had killed his father and mother. He asked Aki to come with him to a safe place, but she refused. She told him that her mother was being held hostage in one of the Seven-Star Society's hospitals, and she couldn't abandon her. Yasha promised her that he would rescue both her and her mother one day. Aki's eyes welled with tears, but a small smile appeared on her face. She explained that as long as she remained under the Society's control, other organizations wouldn't target her. More than anything, she said she was worried about him. To her, it felt like just yesterday when Yasha and May had played innocently together. She remarked how much he had grown. Finally, she asked him what he intended to do now. Yasha replied that, for now, there were things he needed to investigate and people he needed to meet, so he planned to re-enroll in university. The scene shifted into a dark room where a man with glasses sat on a chair, studying Yasha's reports intently. He noted aloud to himself that Yasha was heavily wounded and clearly not in his best condition. He questioned whether he should let this chance slip away because of Yasha's current state, but ultimately concluded that he would handle Yasha before the man had a chance to recover. Another man, standing nearby, proposed that they could exploit a legal loophole. This man was none other than Kazuki, the chief of the intelligence department. The subordinate then inquired about the kind of individual Kazuki would assign to the job. Kazuki, with an evil smirk, responded that he would be sending 2 people who were currently in the second stage. When asked whether those individuals were awakened, Kazuki admitted that there was only a slight chance. The subordinate leaned back in his chair, clearly disappointed by the uncertain answer. The scene transitioned to a shiny, bright day, the sun blazing intensely over the campus. Inside a university building, Yasha encountered an old classmate, someone who had believed for a long time that Yasha was dead. Yasha told him that he had gone abroad to study. The classmate asked where he had been for the past few years, but Yasha simply chuckled in response. The classmate then joked with slight concern, asking if Yasha wasn't doing anything shady again. At that moment, Yasha recalled the time he had pointed a gun at a man just to take his phone. They continued to chat, exchanging trivial conversation for a while. Yasha then pointed toward a nearby group and asked about them. His friend informed him that the group was known as Paradise, and they had come from a northern country. Yasha mused if they were cosplaying as mafia members inside the university, to which his friend, his expression darkening, replied that calling it cosplay was kinder than the harsh reality. He explained that Japan's international situation had become complicated. Oil was being replaced by a new form of energy called energy pack, a resource capable of overlimiting the human body and transforming people into awakeners. As Japan was the primary developer of this new energy, the country had become flooded with awakeners. Consequently, underworld organizations had started to make bold moves. Though these groups were officially here for cultural exchange, in reality, they were acting as spies. He added under his breath that, in truth, they were just mafia. He continued to explain that the university had become a battleground for various gangs: Paradise from the north, Pure Stream from the east, and Hanrang from Japan. These gangs had created a system known as a duel, an arbitrary rule where any complaint had to be settled through combat. Although the students' self-governing committee was supposed to serve as the governing authority, it had lost its power and become irrelevant. Yasha thought it was all a pointless waste of time. Suddenly, a man approached Yasha and told him that he was in the way. Yasha simply smirked and told him to get lost. The air around them grew heavier with tension. At that moment, a skinny young man appeared, addressing the tall man with a taunt. He pointed out that the man probably couldn't pass because of his massive frame. The tall man narrowed his eyes, stating that he had never seen the skinny man before and accusing him of looking down on Hanrang. He clenched his fist and asked whether the people of Paradise hadn't been taught to keep their mouths shut. He then lunged at the skinny man, throwing a punch. The skinny man dodged it with ease and caught his arm midair. His eyes turned red as he told the attacker that adults shouldn't meddle in childish games. Suddenly, a girl arrived with her gang and intervened. She asked whether Hanrang was planning to disturb the balance. The skinny man's eyes widened with fear as he recognized her, Zhang Qiuxia from Paradise. He then turned his gaze toward Yasha and pointed at him, saying that it seemed Yasha didn't care about himself. Yasha began to wonder whether the man somehow knew who he was. Zhang walked past Yasha, sparing him only a brief glance. She stated that he was nothing, someone who could only watch as others were devoured. Her voice grew colder as she muttered that he was basically trash. Yasha and his friend remained silent as they watched her group walk away. Moments later, a student rushed up and asked Yasha's friend, his sensei, whether he was alright. This student was Tachibana Iori, the president of the students' self-governing committee. The teacher reassured him not to worry. Tachibana apologized for arriving late and admitted that the committee had become nothing more than an empty organization, one that existed in name only and served no real purpose. He turned to Yasha and requested that he look after them. Yasha agreed quietly. However, he suddenly paused, realizing with a sinking feeling that Sawayama, his friend, had arranged for him to be part of the organization without his consent. Yasha's expression grew grim. A dark aura began to emanate from him. Tachibana, sensing the shift, quickly explained that Sawayama had claimed he would bring in someone amazing as a counselor. Yasha turned toward Sawayama and accused him of tricking him. Then, addressing Tachibana, he asked whether it even mattered if he accepted the position. He questioned whether the committee was any different from the gangs. He asked if they would remain humble once they gained real authority. Tachibana remained silent for a moment before answering with determination that they would change. He promised it. Yasha began walking away, saying that in that case, he had no more business with them. Tachibana called out to him, insisting again that they would change. Yasha then asked whether Tachibana would truly stand by his side. Tachibana's expression changed. He was overcome with joy. He promised Yasha that, with his help, they would turn the rotten school into something they could be proud of. Later that night, Yasha, Tachibana, and Sawayama sat on the grass under the stars. The atmosphere was calm and quiet. Yasha asked Tachibana whether he thought he had charisma. Tachibana gave a nostalgic thumbs up and claimed that the most important trait for a president was, above all, alcohol tolerance. He then grew more serious and admitted that he wanted to ask Yasha something. He asked if it was true that Yasha was close with Kei-sensei and wanted to know how they had first met. Yasha raised an eyebrow, repeating the question with amusement. That terrifying Kei-sensei? The scene shifted again. A man stood tall, while another lay collapsed at his feet. The floor of the room was covered with bodies, people groaning in pain or lying unconscious, blood splattered across the tiles. At the center of it all stood Yasha, unmoved by the devastation. He looked down at the man and questioned whether they had always been so proud of bullying the weak. Running a hand through his hair, he muttered with disdain that being near people like them made him feel like trash. As he turned, he spotted a boy crawling across the floor, trembling and shivering. Yasha approached him and told him that he recognized something in him, something he had once experienced himself, samtawa aim. He explained that the feeling of one's body and soul being torn apart was the beginning of a process he called molting. Yasha extended a hand toward the boy and said that since he had seen it with his own eyes, he could no longer ignore it. He promised to protect him until the process was complete, ensuring that no one would touch him. But once that phase ended, Yasha added, the boy would be on his own. At those words, the boy's eyes widened, shocked by both the pain and the strange comfort in Yasha's voice. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit office, a man sat in a chair reading Yasha's medical report. As he scanned the file, he wondered whether what he was feeling was nostalgia, but quickly corrected himself. It wasn't nostalgia, he thought. It was the thrill of something unfamiliar, yet exciting. He noted that Yasha had undergone the same molting process he once had. It wasn't surprising that Yasha had healed during that incident, but what puzzled him was how Yasha had managed to remain so composed in the middle of it. Then a thought struck him. He wondered if Yasha had already advanced to the next stage. Looking toward a notice board plastered with files, he spoke aloud that while he didn't expect much from the Awakeners of Paradise, Hanrang, or even the Seven-Star Society, things were beginning to get interesting. This man was K, and with a smirk, he concluded that he might soon have himself a guinea pig. The scene changed to a sunny day on the university's running track. Yasha walked beside Sawayama and remarked that he was too weak. Sawayama let out a long sigh as he opened a water bottle. He said he never expected Yasha to actually accept the position of counselor for the students' committee, and that it was rich coming from someone like him to call others weak. Sawayama guessed that maybe Yasha thought finding a place to settle down wouldn't be so bad. He also believed Yasha didn't like seeing his friends being pushed into corners. In any case, he said, he was happy about Yasha's decision. Yasha responded that he hadn't accepted the position for the lodging. He explained that it was because he had sensed Tachibana's true feelings. He added that he was the kind of person who could tell when someone was lying, and admitted that he liked people who didn't pretend to be something they weren't. Sawayama smirked and commented that such people were rare in their time. Just then, a girl approached. It was Aoi, the same girl from the earlier bus incident. Yasha was visibly surprised to see her. Aoi asked what he was doing there. Yasha replied with a grin, saying that he did look like a student, didn't he? Sawayama, watching their casual exchange, grew irritated and started yelling at Yasha, annoyed by how easily Aoi got along with him. Yasha turned back to Aoi and asked her what she was doing there. She told him she had come to the campus to interview a student. She went on to say she had heard rumors that multiple organizations were rising in power within the university. Nearby students started glancing at them, recognizing Aoi and Yasha standing together. Aoi explained that because the university was the top in the country, it was only natural that it attracted external influences. She said she had come to assess how bad the situation really was. But she sighed and added that no one had agreed to be interviewed so far. Yasha silently wondered how she had managed to survive until now. Aoi told him she couldn't go back to the office empty-handed. Her team leader would be angry. Yasha offered his help. She looked surprised and asked if he was being serious. After all, she hadn't been able to interview even a single student. Yasha then pointed to Sawayama and said that despite his looks, Sawayama was one of the university's professors and that he knew quite a lot. The three of them moved to another area. While Aoi and Sawayama sat on a bench for the interview, Yasha stood nearby. Sawayama explained the internal structure of the university's factions. Aoi commented that it seemed this wasn't just about cultural exchange. Sawayama confirmed that some of the groups were backed by powerful organizations. When Aoi asked if there were any exceptions, Sawayama told her about a group called Fluorescent, led by a girl. He explained that they hadn't caused any problems and didn't seem to be supported by any underground network. Though not strong in influence or power, they were oddly famous. That, he said, was all he knew about them. He then advised her not to try interviewing any of the other factions. After a while, Sawayama stood up, saying he had work to attend to and needed to leave. Aoi turned to Yasha and said Sawayama seemed like a good person. But despite the brief interview, she still wasn't fully satisfied. Yasha then offered to give her a tour around campus, on the condition that she remained by his side at all times. Aoi lit up and, in the back of her mind, wondered if this could be considered a campus date. In another part of the campus, a man asked his subordinate about the reporter. He wanted to know where she was. He said he had heard someone had been sniffing around. As his anger grew, he yelled, asking whether she was trying to endorse the students' committee. Without warning, the man lunged at Aoi with a clenched fist. But Yasha reacted immediately. He picked Aoi up and dodged the strike in one swift movement. The man's blow landed on a nearby table, smashing it to pieces with sheer force. Yasha stood his ground, firm and calm. The attacker asked Yasha if he planned to resist paradise. Yasha replied with a smirk, questioning why he should bother resisting. The man approached Aoi again and asked why Yasha hadn't said anything earlier. Yasha locked eyes with him and asked if, by resisting, the man meant fighting to keep one's rights from being stolen. If that was the case, Yasha said, then he wouldn't take those rights away. The man's face twisted in fury. He demanded to know what Yasha had just said. Yasha took a step forward, his voice cold as ice. He announced, on behalf of the students' committee, that he was officially declaring a duel against paradise. Then, with a quiet, dangerous smile, Yasha added that they should resist as best as they could.